the auction floor of shame. The marketplace buzzed with noise. Bright lights flashed over the auction floor. Creatures from across the galaxy shouted bids for slaves, workers, dancers, servants. The air smelled like dust, sweat, and money. In the center stood her, tall, strong, and silent. She was a female alien from the Grivan species. Her skin was smooth and dark purple, her silver eyes downcast. Her body was large, muscular, and full-figured. Too full for most buyers' tastes. The auctioneer laughed. Next on sale, a strong-boned Grivan girl built like a battle tank but with a soft voice. Any offers? Silence. A few buyers snorted. She's too big. Can she even fit through a doorway? I'd need 3 rooms for her. They laughed. Loud. Cruel. The girl didn't move. She just stood there, shoulders straight, even though her wrists were chained. Her heart was heavy, but she didn't let it show. This wasn't the first time she was mocked. Probably not the last. The auctioneer tried again. Come on, cheap price, strong back, she can lift a plow or crush a rebel. Still no hands raised. No offers. Behind the crowd, a human man watched quietly. His name was Jonas, a mechanic from a faraway farm world. He wore a long coat, dusty boots, and had kind but tired eyes. He had come to the market looking for scrap tools. Not a slave. But something about the girl caught his eye. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't break. She just stood. Like a mountain. A sad, proud mountain. All right, the auctioneer said, wiping sweat from his forehead. No takers? Then she goes to the mines. Send her to scrap labor with the other unsellables. I'll take her, said a voice. The crowd turned. The auctioneer blinked. What? Jonas stepped forward, holding out a small credit stick. You heard me. I'll take her. The alien girl lifted her head, eyes locking with his for the first time. Whispers rose. A human? For her? He must be crazy. The auctioneer laughed again. You sure, stranger? She's not pleasure-sized. You know what I mean. Jonas said nothing. He only handed over the credits. The chains clicked open. The girl didn't move. She didn't understand. Was this a joke? A trick? The auctioneer shoved her forward. Go on, big girl. You got yourself a new master. Jonas looked at her. You're not my slave, he said simply. You're coming with me because I think you deserve better than this. The girl was stunned. She followed him through the crowd in silence. No one spoke to them. Some stared. Some laughed. Some whispered. But Jonas didn't care. Outside, the twin suns were setting and the sky turned orange and deep blue. The girl walked a few steps behind him, confused, tense. Why? She finally asked. Jonas glanced at her. Why what? Why, me? He stopped, turned to her and shrugged. Because they couldn't see what I saw. What did you see? Jonas smiled faintly. Someone who's strong and hasn't given up, that's rare. The girl didn't know what to say. No one had ever said that before. Not about her body. Not about her strength. Not even about her spirit. She looked at his hand. It wasn't holding a chain. It wasn't pulling her like property. It was just guiding her, gently. As they walked into the desert night toward his old rusty speeder, the girl felt something strange inside her chest. Was this freedom? Or was it just another kind of dream? She didn't know yet, but for the first time in a long time, she hoped. The quiet man and the empty farm. The desert wind blew across the road, lifting dust into the twilight sky. The human speeder hummed low and steady, carrying 2 quiet souls. One who had always been judged and one who never said much at all. She sat beside him, unsure if she should speak or stay silent. Her hands rested on her lap, still remembering the feel of cold chains. But here, there were no chains, no cuffs, no collars. Jonas didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the road. His voice was calm when he finally said, "You hungry?" She blinked. No one had asked her that before. Yes, she whispered. There's food at the farm, he replied simply. After that, silence again. Not cold silence, just peaceful. Hours. Later, they arrived at a lonely hill where an old farmhouse stood like a forgotten dream. The house was made of faded bricks, with a tin roof and crooked windows. A small water tank bubbled nearby. The barn beside it had half its roof missing. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, and it was his. Jonas opened the door for her. You can stay here. No locks, no guards. It's not a palace, but it's safe. She stepped inside. The floor creaked. The air smelled like oil and dry bread. Still, it felt warmer than any palace she had ever imagined. He showed her a room with a bed, a clean blanket, even a small mirror. I fixed this up last year. Wasn't sure why. Maybe I knew you were coming, he said with a small smile, then added, Don't worry. I sleep across the hall. She sat on the bed slowly. It didn't collapse under her weight. That surprised her. You don't have to do anything for me, he added. I don't expect service or anything. She looked up sharply. Then why did you take me? He thought for a moment. I was born with nothing. Everyone said I wasn't worth much. Until one person believed I was. Changed everything. Figured maybe it's my turn. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was tight. Later that night, she sat by the window staring out at the stars. The bed behind her was warm, but she couldn't sleep. Who was this man? He hadn't touched her, hadn't stared at her body with hunger or disgust. He had given her space, clothes, food, a room, and something even rarer, respect. Was this real? She stared at her reflection in the window. Too big, too strong, too unwanted. That's what everyone had always said. But tonight, maybe she wasn't too anything. Maybe she was enough. At dawn, a loud screech woke her. She ran outside in a panic, expecting danger. Instead, she found Jonas under a broken machine swearing softly, oil on his face. He glanced up and smirked. Relax. Just fixing the feeder bot. It hates me. Without thinking, she dropped to her knees and helped lift the part he was struggling with. He paused, surprised. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. Together they fixed the machine. He nodded. You're strong. She looked down. I always was. Just no one wanted strong. He didn't reply, but he handed her a wrench with a small grin. As the sun rose higher, she cleaned, repaired panels, and moved heavy tools like they were feathers. Jonas watched her, never with lust, never with judgment, only admiration. You're more help than 5 workers, he said. She smiled, a small smile, but real. That evening, when she sat on the same bed, tired but proud, she thought, maybe this is what it means to belong somewhere, not as a slave, not as a servant, but as a partner, strangers but not enemies. 3 days had passed. She no longer waited for chains. She no longer looked behind her every minute, and yet, she didn't know what to do with the freedom she had. Her name was Vika. In her world, it meant Stormborn, but no one had called her by name in years. Not until Jonas asked one morning simply, What should I call you? She had stared at him, unsure. Do you want to name me? She asked, like so many masters before him had done. But he shook his head. No, I want to know your name. So she told him, and he said it softly once, as if testing the taste of Torsveka. And in that moment, she felt more seen than in her entire life. Each day began early. Jonas fixed his machines. Veka watered the dry root plants with giant barrels. When the solar panel system shorted out, she climbed the roof without being asked. They spoke little, but their silence wasn't empty anymore. She watched the way he worked, calm, patient, precise. He watched her move, strong, careful, focused. She learned he had once worked in spaceports, left that life after losing his brother in a machine accident. Now he fixed old machines and grew food no one bought. She told him nothing of her past, only that she came from a moon where size was shame. He never asked for more. He only said, "You're welcome to stay as long as you like." One afternoon, a sandstorm came without warning. The wind howled. Metal panels flew. Dust turned the sky red. Jonas ran out to tie down the solar wings. Veka followed, grabbing a thick rope. She didn't wait for his command, just acted. The wind nearly knocked Jonas over, but she caught him with one arm and held tight. They tied down the wings together, their clothes whipping in the storm. Inside, after it passed, they sat on the floor, coughing and laughing. "You almost flew," she teased. "You saved me," he grinned. She looked away. "You saved me first." Their eyes met, but neither said more. That night she stood at the mirror. She touched her reflection, her wide shoulders, thick arms, powerful thighs. The same body others called too much. Jonas had never looked at her with hunger or hate, not once. Why? Why didn't he flinch? Why didn't he stare? The next morning she asked him directly, "Do I disgust you?" He looked at her with confusion. "Why would you think that?" "Because of what I am." "You mean strong?" She paused. "No, I mean big." He shook his head. "You think I rescued you out of pity?" She didn't answer. He set down his tool, walked over, stood in front of her, not touching, just close. "I don't want you to change, Veka," he said. "Not your body, not your size, not even your silence." She stared at him, searching his eyes for a lie. She found none. That evening, she cooked food for him, badly. It burned. He still ate it with a smile. "You're a better fighter than a cook," he joked. She hit him with a towel, and they both laughed. It was a strange, soft laugh, the kind that only comes from people learning to trust. At night, under the desert sky, she sat beside him on the broken porch. They didn't hold hands, didn't speak much. But when a cold wind came, he offered her his coat. And she didn't give it back. Because in that silence, in that shared space, something was growing. Not ownership, not debt, not lust. Connection. Strangers, yes, but no longer enemies. Maybe something more. Maybe something new. The eyes that follow her. The town was small. Just a few buildings scattered around a dried riverbed. But even in a place this quiet, eyes always watched. Jonas rarely visited the town, but he needed new fuses and solar tape. This time he brought Vika. She didn't want to come. She remembered too well the laughter, the stares, the whispers. But Jonas looked at her and said, "You don't have to hide anymore." So she sat beside him in the speeder, quiet but alert. As they drove through the narrow streets, people turned. Men froze mid-step. Women leaned in to whisper. Children peeked from windows. Veka's shoulders tensed. One man on the corner chuckled, to his friend, loud enough for her to hear. Didn't know Jonas was into giant pets. Another one shouted, "Hey, you renting her out or keeping her all to yourself?" Jonas didn't stop, didn't speak, but his jaw tightened. Veka said nothing, but inside her chest something cold began to curl. At the hardware booth, the shopkeeper refused to make eye contact with her. He only spoke to Jonas. "She gonna break the counter if she leans on it?" he joked, pretending to laugh. Jonas didn't laugh. He just took the items, paid, and left without a word. Veka followed him silently until they reached the speeder. Then she asked softly, "Why didn't you say anything to them?" Jonas looked up at her. "Because I don't want to waste words on fools. But they insulted you because of me." He stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "They didn't insult me. They embarrassed themselves." Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something warmer. She wasn't used to being defended. Not like this. Back at the farm, the mood was quiet. She didn't eat that evening. She sat alone under the sky watching the stars. Jonas brought her a cup of warm broth. "You're thinking too hard," he said. Everyone hated what they saw, she murmured. Even here. They only saw your shape, he replied. Not your strength, not your spirit, not your kindness. I don't think they want to see those things. Then they're blind. She turned to him. Why do you always protect me? He leaned against the porch post, crossing his arms. Because you deserve protection. That's all. No, she said. That's not all. He didn't respond. Because, deep down, he knew she was right. It wasn't just protection anymore. Later that night, someone came. A low hum outside. A hovercycle. Jonas stepped out with a lantern. A local trader, Garland, a rough-looking man with cybernetic eyes, stood by. The gate, I heard you brought home something. Exotic, he sneered. Thought I'd make an offer. Jonas stayed quiet. Garland leaned closer. Name your price. I'll take her off your hands. She doesn't belong with you. From behind the doorway, Veka heard everything. And for the first time, her hands shook. Not in fear, but in anger. Before Jonas could speak, she stepped out into the light. Garland blinked, startled, then smirked. Well, look at you. What does he even do with a thing like you? Veka's eyes glowed in the moonlight. Jonas stepped in front of her. His voice was calm, cold. Leave. She's not even human, Jonas. She's more human than you'll ever be. Garland stared at him. But the quiet fury in Jonas's eyes said enough. He backed away. Fine, he muttered. But people are talking. Jonas didn't care, and neither did Veka anymore, because tonight she wasn't just defended, she was stood beside. When the hovercycle disappeared into the night, she looked at Jonas. You really won't let anyone take me, will you? His voice was steady. You're not mine to give away. Her breath caught. Then, what am I to you? He paused, then said quietly, someone I want to know. Someone I choose to care for. Veka turned away, blinking hard, because no one had ever said that to her. Not once. The day trouble returned. It was a calm morning. Jonas was inside fixing a faulty heat vent. Veka was outside near the barn, lifting a water drum on her shoulder like it weighed nothing. The birds made soft chirping sounds. The wind was still, too. Still. That's when she heard it. A low engine, smooth, sharp, and too clean for this dusty planet. She turned toward the sound. A sleek black hover shuttle landed just past the ridge. 3 figures stepped out, uniforms, weapons, and a symbol she remembered too well, the golden flame of House Veltor, her old owners. Her heart dropped. They found her. The leader, a pale-skinned alien with narrow yellow eyes, stepped forward. Well, he said, grinning. Thought you could vanish forever, did you? She didn't move. He looked her up and down. Still big, still worthless, but technically you were property. You escaped auction. That makes you stolen goods. Veka clenched her fists. I wasn't stolen. I was bought. Fair and legal, she said quietly. He laughed. That human? His credits were faked. We've reversed the trade. You belong to House Veltor again. Behind her, Jonas stepped out of the house, holding a wrench in one hand. Back away from her, he said calmly. The man turned. You must be the buyer. How kind of you to raise our investment like a house pet. She's not your property. Galactic, law says otherwise. And I suggest you don't make this difficult. 2 guards flanked Veka. One reached for her arm. She grabbed his wrist and twisted, hard. There was a loud crack. The guard screamed and dropped to the ground. The second guard raised a stun baton, but Jonas was faster. He hurled the wrench, across the air. Clang. It hit the guard's helmet, knocking him back. The leader pulled a weapon from his coat. Veka stood in front of Jonas. Touch him, she growled, and you'll leave in pieces. For a long second, no one moved. Then the leader hissed, You'll regret this. She's not worth the blood you'll spill for her. She's worth more than any of you, Jonas replied. The leader spit on the ground and turned. Enjoy hiding, human. We'll be back, with legal force next time. The shuttle roared into the sky, leaving dust behind. Later, inside the house, Jonas wiped blood from his lip. Veka gently pressed a cold cloth to his bruised cheek. "You didn't have to fight," she whispered. "I wanted to. They'll come back with papers, with soldiers." He looked at her. "Let them. I won't hand you over. Not to anyone." She said nothing, but her eyes filled with something fierce. Not fear. Love. That night she didn't sit in her room. She sat beside him, by the fire. Quietly. Without walls between them. "Why do you keep risking yourself for me?" she asked. Jonas stared into the flames. "Because you changed this place, Vika. You made it feel like a home again. I didn't mean to. I know. That's why it matters." She looked down. Her large hands rested on her lap. "I was always told I had no worth, no beauty, no future." Jonas turned to her. Then they were blind. Slowly, carefully, she reached out her hand. He took it, and in that small touch, a promise passed between them, unspoken, but unbreakable. Her strength, his life the next day, came with heat. The sun beat down harder than usual, and the wind carried dry static that cracked at the edges of the roof. Jonas was in the engine shed, working on the old fuel stabilizer. The machine powered half the farm, but it was ancient and stubborn like everything else he owned. Veka had gone into the valley to collect fallen fruit from the sand trees. She wasn't far. That's what saved his life. The explosion wasn't loud. It was deep, like a silent growl from under the ground. A puff of black smoke shot from the shed side. A second later, the metal roof buckled and collapsed with a crash. Veka froze, then ran. She reached the shed in seconds. The door was half buried under debris. "Jonas," she shouted. No answer. She shoved aside metal panels, wood wires, her hands bled, her shoulders burned, but she didn't stop. The structure groaned above her like it was ready to fall again. "Jonas!" she screamed. Then, a cough. Faint, from deep inside. She dropped to her knees and tore through the wreckage with wild strength. Her fingers found his coat. She pulled, and pulled again until she could see him. His leg was pinned beneath a support beam. He was barely conscious. "Veka, get out, it's not safe." She ignored him, took a breath, then wrapped her arms around the beam. Jonas blinked through the dust. What he saw was something unbelievable. Veka's muscles tensed, her arms shook, her feet dug into the ground like roots. And slowly, the impossible began to happen. The beam rose. She screamed as she lifted it, not in pain but in defiance. And then, she threw it aside with a final roar. Jonas gasped. The weight lifted. Both literally, and in his chest. She dragged him out into the light, cradling him like something precious. "I told you to run," he whispered, trying to smile. "You're the only thing I won't run from," she said. Then she saw the wound. His leg was bleeding bad, a long, deep gash. His breathing was shallow. She carried him inside, hands trembling. She had never done field medicine, but she did now. With torn cloth, hot water, clean thread, she held his leg tight and stitched. He groaned once, then passed out. Hours later, as the twin moons rose, Jonas opened his eyes. She was still by his side, watching, not moving. "Hey," he whispered. "You should have let me do the repairs," she said quietly. He smiled weakly. "You're better at smashing than fixing." She gave a dry laugh. "I almost lost you," she said. "You didn't. You almost died." "But I didn't." He reached up and she leaned closer. His hand brushed her cheek. "You saved me, Veka. You really did." She swallowed hard. "That's twice now." He nodded. "Guess I owe you dinner." "You owe me your life." He smiled again, gladly. That night she sat beside his bed, watching him breathe. Once, her body had been called a burden. Now it had lifted a wall, held a life, stitched a wound. She looked at her arms, her hands, her scars. This body was never a curse, it was a gift, a weapon, a shelter. And now, someone finally saw it that way. Outside, a storm was building again. But inside the small house, the fire was warm, and between the two of them, something deeper burned. Not just survival, not just safety, but the start of forever, the girl they mocked. The queen. He chose. A week passed. Jonas healed slowly. He could walk now, limping a little with a cane. Vika stayed close, helping him move, fixing machines herself, even cooking with her clumsy hands. The farm no longer felt lonely. It felt alive. But peace never lasts forever, not when the past is hunting you. The sky cracked open one morning with the roar of ships. 3 dark vessels landed beyond the ridge, this time with official sigils, galactic enforcers, and a noble from House Veltor in shining black robes. They marched down the path with 10 armored guards. Vika stood in front of the house before they reached the gate. This time she was not afraid. The noble raised a scroll. By order of Galactic trade law, the female known as Vika is to be seized as misappropriated property. Jonas stepped outside, leaning on his cane. She's not property. She was bought with invalid funds, the noble said flatly. Her sale is void. You are illegally harboring her. I'm not harboring anyone, Jonas said. She's here because I asked her to stay. The noble didn't flinch. Stand. Aside. Or be removed. Jonas looked at Vika. You don't have to go with them. Vika looked at the soldiers, then back at him. I'm done being taken, she said softly. She stepped forward, her voice calm but deep like thunder. You came here thinking I was still the weak girl on the auction floor, she said to the noble. You mocked my body, called me useless. She raised her hand and cracked her knuckles. But look at me now. One of the soldiers stepped forward, trying to grab her shoulder. She didn't move. He placed his hand on her and found himself flying backward 10 feet, landing in the dirt with a loud grunt. Gasps rippled through the squad. She looked at the rest. Next. No one moved. Even the noble looked nervous now. Jonas stepped beside her, tall and steady. She's not yours. You don't get to claim someone who doesn't want to be claimed, the noble hissed. She's a born servant. No, Jonas said, his voice clear and strong. She's my partner. Vika's eyes widened. He hadn't said friend, he hadn't said guest, he had said partner. Jonas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object. A ring. I had this made from parts of the machine you saved me from, he said to her. I was waiting for the right moment. Her breath caught. You want to marry me? I want the galaxy to know what I already do, Jonas said. That you are mine. Not as a slave, not as a servant, but as the one I choose to share everything with. She stared at him, then slowly took the ring and her large, scarred fingers gently slipped it on. When she looked back at the noble, her eyes gleamed. You heard the man. I belong to no house, except his. The noble clenched his jaw. This isn't over. You're right, Vika said, stepping forward. This is just beginning. With that, the noble and his soldiers retreated. No fight, no chains, just defeat. That night, under a sky full of stars, Jonas and Vika stood on the porch together. There was no crowd, no fancy ceremony, just the wind, the warmth, and a bond that was earned, not forced. I used to believe no one would ever want someone like me, Vika whispered. Jonas looked at her. I didn't just want you, he said. I needed you. She smiled. Not a sad smile, not a hopeful one, but a real, radiant one. And so, the girl they mocked, the one too big, too strong, too different to be loved, became the queen of a small farm and the heart of a quiet man who saw her not as a mistake, but as the greatest choice he ever made.